Welcome, everybody. My name is David Alvarez, and once again, we have interviewed candidates that wish to represent us in the United States Congress. So please take the time to watch these interviews and to hear their responses to the questions that our membership has come up to ask them. And please cast your vote. Your vote will make a difference. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. All right, welcome. We're here with Howard Kearney, who is a congressional candidate for our United States Congress District 1. We're going to get right into the questions. Welcome, Howard.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, question 1 is about Medicare for all. Do you consider healthcare a human right? If so, do you support a public option, Medicare for all, or another progressive system to guarantee healthcare to every American regardless of income?
Well, to get straight to the answer, no, I don't think that medical care is a basic human right. I think that people will offer medical care as a basic offering to people. I'm thinking back before there was socialized medicine, before Medicare, the people were still being taken care of through charity organizations, private organizations, whether it be like the Kiwanis or Salvation Army. That was always provided. So no, I really don't think that it's a basic human right to have that. And I'm sorry, there was a second part of that question. I didn't catch the...
Well, do you support some kind of public option in that?
Really, public meaning government, I'm assuming
Yes.
is what meant by that. And no, again, I will take a position that as best as we can, we need to have that as a private, because I don't believe in enforcing people to provide medical care, which has been kind of talked about in other programs, is to, make you pay for, make you provide that service as a doctor. So I don't think so, not at all.
Okay, all right. Next question is about taxes. What is your opinion of progressive taxation, and how do you view our current usage of sales tax versus income tax, taxation of earned income versus passive income, and the ranges of our current tax brackets?
Well, I'm sure you've heard from libertarians that our pet battle cry is taxation is theft. That's our. It seems to be every time you talk to a libertarian, they'll say taxation is theft, and they'll do it. The reality is it's a very difficult situation, because you're asking the question: do you tax on production or do you tax on consumption?
Okay.
And so production is, my job. Do you tax me on my job, or do you just tax me on sales taxes? That's really kind of what it gets down to. And I could go both ways. I totally understand if the understanding is that you need the taxes to fund the government, right? And so the true purpose of government would actually be a lot smaller than what it needs to be. So the amount of taxes would be very little compared to what today's rates are. I had an opportunity to visit a man's office who's had his father's income tax form from back in 1922, and it was a 1% tax. That's it. One side of the sheet, it was a 1040 form, and that was it. We've gone from a 1% tax, which they promised when it was enacted, to be 1% and we'll never ask for any more, to now what? I'm personally at 27% tax rate right now. So I am not at all in favor of taxes in any form. I think the government can be funded by many other ways. For example, if we still believe that roads ought to be built by the government, seems a logical position today. How would they fund that? Well, right now we still have the gasoline tax. That's a consumption. And if I want to control how much taxes I pay, I limit my consumption. I choose what I want to do or not do with that. There's taxes on tires, taxes on cars. There's taxes on practically everything that are related to roads and services. So that could be funded that way. But there's a lot of taxes that are not needed. And so I, generally speaking, would not be in favor of these taxes.
Well, using your example, if you owned a company that owned 20,000 18-wheel trucks,
okay,
how would you propose to tax that company as opposed to the individual who has one truck?
Well, I think it's logical to believe that the 20,000 vehicles use the road a lot more than a personal car would use. The wear and tear on a road is, proportional to the weight of the vehicle. That's for sure. So, yeah, I would think that they would be paying more. And it's a truer cost of the cost of the service that they're providing. It's a much truer cost. A small farmer who has maybe a single pickup load of produce will be using a whole lot less. Therefore, it is appropriate that they would be not charged as much as a 20,000 or 2,000 fleet vehicle organization.
Okay.
So.
All right. Next question is about the environment. In terms of the energy sector, Louisiana invests greatly, or has oil and gas investments. It's also no secret that our politicians are heavily funded by the oil and gas industry,
Absolutely.
causing them to represent their interests above those of the common citizen. Do you believe that our state should be investing in alternative energy? And if so, what will you do specifically to shift our economy in that regard?
First of all, absolutely. I'm a very big favor of solar. I'm second favored in like wind and those other alternative energies, because it makes no logical sense to be using up a resource that has a finite life. We know that there's only so much petroleum in the ground. There's only so much coal in the ground. There's only so much even natural gas. And I don't think we can wait however long it takes to reproduce coal or oil, the 20,000 years or whatever they're expecting it to be. So getting a renewable energy is the smart way to go. And so I would absolutely be in favor of these alternative, what we call alternative. I got a feeling in 5 years they'll be the main fuel, and gasoline will be the alternative fuel. Fingers crossed on that. I'm hoping for that. But what would I do today? Well, first of all, I really think we need to eliminate the tax incentives on solar. We need to get it back to its true cost. I know what it was intentioned for, to try to encourage the consumer to get into solar, get into wind, and so they would have these tax credit, and the homeowner would have tax credits and stuff like that. But all that does is it favors an organization, and you get into this mentality that if you want anything done, you first have to please Congress. You've got to get them on your side, as opposed to just please the consumer. Consumers should be pleased by the quality of the product and by the price of the product. And if solar can't be priced cheap enough to be in competition with gas and oil, then they need to innovate better in solar, is what they need to do. Not look for the government to try to fix that gap. And by the way, I don't know if you've noticed, solar has now gotten cheaper than oil and gas per kilowatt hour. It has just now passed that line of what is cheaper. So that's why I think that solar is going to go even better. And I think that the incentives for taxes aren't really needed. And again, it shows favoritism, and I'm absolutely against any kind of government favoritism on any kind of industry. Because today it's a favored industry. Tomorrow it could be another favored industry, right? We could invent another power source. I don't know what it is. And then that's the better one to use, right? Or it's the politically correct one to use. Then all of a sudden solar's out of favor, and now we have this other. And so it's a chasing the tail. The best policy of government is not to favor businesses, but allow businesses to be free to innovate and come up with solutions on their own.
Okay. Next is about college, universities. In the United States, the price of a college degree is crippling debt, brought upon by high cost of education, student loans, etc. Will you support legislation to make public universities tuition free?
No. I think the cause of high cost of tuition in school has been the federal student loan program. That's what's caused it. And that's also what TOPS has caused. My son, daughter, I had been saving and planning for them to go to college. And I had a certain mind, you know, I looked on the websites, got the prices, what it was going to be, and where my targets was. TOPS became active. And the year after TOPS became active, mysteriously, all of a sudden, all the other charges, room and board and everything, peaked up, started getting more and more expensive. Yes, TOPS paid for that tuition, but that tuition became a very small part of the overall cost of education. All that other stuff is what greatly increased. So where I was planning for a $5,000, you know, now all of a sudden was $11,000. Okay. My youngest daughter got some student loans, much to my, you know, disencouragement of that. And she got it easily. She had no real job. She had no real prospect to pay it off. But yet she got this, you know, high interest rate loan to pay for an exorbitant tuition to go to school. And I think that's what's causing the high rates of education. It isn't anything, it's not, you're not getting better education. You're not getting more education. You're just getting a more costly education. So I would be absolutely in favor of figuring out ways to get that terminated, the student loans. I remember when I was in school, and believe it or not, there was school back when I was young, my whole cost of tuition was $300 a semester. And how did I do that? Well, I worked part-time. My parents gave a couple of, you know, hundreds of dollars too to help me through the school to get the books and other, you know, the other costs associated with education. What changed? What all of a sudden made education much more expensive today than it was back then? We're still teaching history, as far as I know, the same. Mathematics, pretty much the same, and on and on and on. So what's causing it is government has caused this tuition problem. And it's not government that's going to fix it. Government just needs to get out of education, really at all levels, but particularly at the higher college levels, which I assume is which question was for college,
yes.
right? Yeah,
Yes,
I figured it was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. The next one's about our military.
Okay.
The United States is currently spending over $500 billion on our military budget. This has contributed to regime change and destabilizing of countries throughout this world. As a member of Congress, you will be able to vote on the distribution of our tax dollars. Are we spending too much on our military, and if so, how are you going to change that?
Yes, we are spending way too much on our military. I think one of the first things that I'm seeking to do is to vote no on the AUMF. That's the Authorization for Military Funds, which is the unconstitutional way of funding military engagements. That's what's keeping the executive branch able to invade other countries and make regime changes and things like that. We have 170 military bases throughout the world right now. We don't need a military base presence in Frankfurt, Germany. We really don't, and we don't need. I used to live in Frankfurt as a kid, so I know that one is there. There is no reason to have military bases throughout the world. Our Constitution makes it very clear that the standing army was for defense, and it was meant to be a militia, is what it was. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the Constitution, it also says a standing army for only 2 years. So it was only for as needed did we need a standing army, because our founding fathers were very afraid of what we have today. They somehow knew that a standing army that was continuous would feed itself to want more, to be more. Now, you know, some will say I'm anti-military. Absolutely not. I am in awe of people who serve in the military and who and do it with a sense of pride. I am, and those that give their lives or risk their lives, I'm just in awe of them, and I appreciate them so much. What frustrates me is that it's the politicians that have put them into these positions. That's what frustrates me. What frustrates me is having a Veterans Day that we keep adding more veterans to. We should be looking for the day when Veterans Day becomes so obsolete we have no more veterans to honor. That should be our goal, whether it be Veterans Day or Memorial Day. We should be targeting to eliminate those days, not keep them going. And our military industrial complex now is just keeps building more and inventing more risks and more bad people for us to attack. Now it's called terrorists, which is a very convenient term to use because it's an impossible definition to pinpoint, to draw, to picture up. You can't overthrow a terrorist government. You just can't do that. So I am very pro-military, very pro-defense, not offense. And so I'm a non-interventionist. That's the word we use to describe my position on the military.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank
Bring
you.
our troops home.
Thank you. Next one's about money in politics. So what methods do you favor or support to combat the corruption of elected representatives caused by the sources from which those candidates have to raise their money for their campaigns? What methods do you favor to change the environment of how we fund our politics?
I would, this may be kind of an out of the left field method. Maybe not, I don't know. I would favor changing the House and Senate rules that say you have to pay to be on a committee. I don't know if you know this or not, but the congressmen and senators have to pay to be on committee, and they have to take that money and give it to the RNC or the DNC. What that does is it just causes the cycle to begin. And that's the cause, the root cause of the problem, is congressmen with all great intentions to follow the Constitution, to limit government spending, sounding like a Republican at the moment here, to do all of that, get swept away because they know in order to affect change, they have to be on a committee. But you can't get on a committee unless you pay your way into that committee. And so what do? They have to compromise, and they do compromise. And that's the shame. That would be my starting point there. I don't attack lobbyists. I mean, that's a fun thing to do, is let's blame everything on a lobbyist. They have a job to do. They're representing their organizations, their companies, and I don't really have a problem with that. That's what they're doing. But the lobbyists and businesses know, how to get a politician in the pocket is to help them get funded to get on a committee to help them out. You help me, I'll help you. And so I would start with that. I would change the rules of the Republican and the Democratic Party. Both the parties are doing that.
But to build on that, would you require transparency in donors
Absolutely.
to know?
And I'm not necessarily, what is that? The Campaign Finance Reform Act that of late passed that limits people's contributions and all this other stuff. I would absolutely be in favor of everyone being open book to every contribution. And I would also be in favor of no limits to those contributions at the same time. Money is free speech, and I don't think that we need to limit the amounts of money. I think the American people are a lot smarter than we try to give them credit, thinking, oh, well, we'll just put enough ads out there and we'll convince the American people to vote a certain way. We've seen elections after elections where that did not happen. I could use the last presidential election as an example of all that money that got spent, and it did not convince the majority of people to vote a certain way. Okay.
Do you feel that corporations are people?
No. As a matter of fact, if I may expand on that, corporations should also not have limited liabilities at all. I think the corporations, their shareholders, the stockholders, should be personally liable for the actions of the corporation. In the old days, if I may say, before limited liability laws came into place, that's the way it was. The shareholders or the stockholders of a company were liable to what that company did. Therefore, that company was a lot more careful on its products, it's what it did, because they knew that anyone who held a share could be personally liable for the actions of the corporation. To me, that's a better way to control corporations. Corporations are not a body, they're not an entity, they're a collection of people. And they need to be held responsible, just like any other organization is held responsible.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you.
Sure.
Next question, gun control.
Okay.
In the state of Louisiana, there are no required background checks to purchase a firearm. There is no minimum age to purchase a shotgun or rifle, and there are no required gun permits necessary to purchase a firearm. Do you believe that we should enact common sense gun regulations?
Okay, so first let me challenge the imperative statement that you said that there are no background checks. When I got my pistol, they filled out the form for the FBI, and I filed it with and they filed it with the FBI online, and the FBI came back and said yes or no. That is a background check. So to say no background check is kind of is misleading. I don't mean that you're trying to mislead, but just it's not as true, on that. Could it be a more extensive background check? Like check with your neighbors and that kind of stuff? Possibly.
How about there are insufficient background checks to purchase?
Could very well be.
Okay.
It could very well be.
So having said that, insufficient checks to purchase firearms and no minimum ages and whatnot, do you feel that we should enact common sense gun regulation?
Okay, so, sorry, I got to ask you this. Are you talking at the federal level or are you talking the state level? Okay, so at the federal level, our Second Amendment rights make it very clear that there's no requirements for to keep and bear arms. I wouldn't add anything to that. It's not been added. There's no footnote to it. So no background check. Period. For the federal level, absolutely not. However, the states have the rights to do what they want to do. And if the states want to put a background check in it, that's up to the state and the state legislature to make that decision. So again, federal level, absolutely not. We need to be able to protect ourselves from our government is what we need to be doing. That's what was the intention of the Second Amendment. It wasn't so that we can control how many deer we kill. It wasn't for hunting. It really wasn't even for burglaries, right? It was for some organization to come and take over my house. And I had that right to protect my family. And because remember where they came from, right? They just came from a Revolutionary War, where the British would just come and seize all weapons and take over their property. That's the background of that. And that background, I'm afraid, seems to be happening today. Do you remember Katrina? Were you here during Katrina?
Yes, I was.
And you remember when sheriff officers were confiscating people's guns in St. Tammany, although they were trying to protect their neighborhood. And just of recent, 2 years ago, I believe, I think it was Texas Supreme Court, finally ruled they were unconstitutional in doing that. That was wrong of them to do it. And so, yes, government can be out of control. And what controls government? I don't think it's the control of the vote, the fear of the vote, as much as an armed citizenry, that puts the fear in the government, that they don't just carte blanche do whatever they want to do.
As a follow-up, do you believe there should be a minimum age for gun ownership?
That one's hard for me. The age of majority implies that you're responsible enough. It's an arbitrary age, right? Some states it's 18, some it's 21, right? In some parts of age of majority is as low as 16, right? Age seems to be an arbitrary factor. I would be in favor of certifying that they know how to operate a gun at whatever age that might be. When I was growing up, sorry to bring back the past so many times, we had schools that actually had gunmanship in the school, in a public school, where they would bring their rifles to school, and they would learn how to operate and work the guns. The Boy Scouts, we used to have guns, and we'd have rifle ranges and those kinds of things is to learn. And we learned responsibility of guns. Maybe some people are thinking young ages and they're thinking children left unattended in the ghetto street, and so it's anything can happen. I'm not sure why people are afraid of young children misusing them, other than parents need to teach their children how to respect guns. And I think you get a better and safer child if you started from that position. So I would believe in certification of children to have guns.
Okay.
But minors can't own anything anyways, by the way. Right? They can't. Not until your age of majority can you own. Okay. You can't enter an illegal contract until your age of majority. Therefore, you can't physically own anything. Sorry, kids. You don't own anything until you become the adult, whatever that might be. So I don't even know how children can own
Okay.
I think there, as I think about that. Yeah.
Okay. Next question is about marijuana.
Okay.
Should marijuana be classified as a Schedule 1 drug alongside cocaine, heroin, and others? If not, will you support the Marijuana Justice Act or other initiatives that seek to decriminalize, legalize recreational and expunge past convictions? What would your strategy be for addressing marijuana in the United
So
States?
you're asking a strategy question, not necessarily a policy.
No,
que-
policy. Through policy.
Through
What's your
policy, yeah.
strategy?
Okay, so first of all, I think that marijuana should not be classified as a Schedule 1 drug. I think that's absolutely nonsensical. More deaths are caused by tobacco than marijuana. If you're going to put anything on a Schedule 1, make it tobacco. Now, I've just endeared a whole bunch of people. It's a good thing I'm not in South Carolina. Marijuana, you know, if anyone ever does their history on how marijuana became this evil drug, would soon discover that it was not about saving people from the immorality of a drug consumption. Because again, alcohol, just as bad, or actually, honestly, worse. I came from a family of abusive alcohol father. I know how bad that is. Okay. Marijuana is nowhere near that classification, none. The problem we have with marijuana and those drugs is because they became illegal, not because of anything else. So I would be absolutely in favor of decriminalizing, not legalizing, because that sounds like the government is giving permission for it, and I just hate that tone altogether. Decriminalize marijuana completely. And if you have to do some kind of control, you control it like a tobacco. I would be against that for the most part, but I would accept tobacco as the next logical step. And then I would immediately seek the expunging of everyone's record that has had some type of marijuana offense to it. Just this so-called war on drugs has been a fail, and has caused so much misery in life that America should just be shamed. Really, should be just as shamed as we were about slavery. We should be shamed that we've caused this. And if you notice, the problems we have in this world are caused by our government that has caused these problems, not by people. There was not a mass marijuana usage and everyone was stoned back in 1917 and nothing could get done and babies were dying on the street because everyone was taking marijuana. It didn't start becoming a problem until government put laws that said it's now illegal. Now people, the daddies and the mommies are now going to prison. And poverty then became even more rampant here. And then back in the 60s, when the big push for fighting the drugs became even more prevalent, and the easy targets were the poor. And unfortunately, most of those easy targets were black people. And that's where law enforcement seems to be focusing on, because it's an easy score. They know they're not going to get contested on their trials, and you know, it's or they're threatened with exorbitant trial costs to make them say, "Oh, well, I better go ahead and plead guilty." All of those little tricks, asset forfeiture. Oh my gosh, that's all stems from the drug war, which now they can take your assets even at the accusation of a drug, not of found convicted, but rather just you're accused of it. And it takes, I hear stories, years and years to get your assets back. So have I answered the question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because I'm really animate about this. Now, I will tell you, and I guess I should do the Dr. Ron Paul here. However, I'm not in favor of anyone smoking marijuana. I would not personally do it, and I would not personally encourage anyone to be doing drugs. But it's not my life to control another person's life. You know, I don't know how you should live at all. I don't know how you should live. I know how I should live, and I know what's good for me. And if you asked me what would be a better way, I would share with you. But that doesn't mean that my morality should be automatically put as laws, just because I don't agree with an action.
Okay. Next is about a minimum wage. Do you feel that the minimum wage should constitute a living wage, where somebody working 40 hours a week is able to live above the poverty line? And how would you recommend policy and law on the national level to address our wages?
Yeah, so one of the first things I would like to see is the repeal of the Fair Wages and Standards Act. That enacted the minimum wage law back in the early 1900s. And I would repeal it. I do not believe in a minimum wage at all. So therefore, that kind of answers the question about living wage that goes with it. I believe that the marketplace should control what that wage is. The good intentions really have just had bad consequences, is what it was. The good intentions were, why don't we set a minimum wage so that some people can get into work at an early age, they have no skills yet, and let them work up to it, and we'll kind of help businesses have an okay limit, to where they can be. It was kind of designed for that, but the reality it didn't. Businesses took advantage of that. They said, minimum wage, great. We don't have to pay you that much. And if you don't like it, well, you quit, right? And what happened was the workforce of very young people started leaving the workforce. And the older people started getting into this workforce because that was their best skill level. They weren't trained with low skill, low paying jobs first to build up on a ladder of success. Once again, what's caused our problems with poverty has been government mandated work laws. That's what's caused it. And it's my belief that minimum wage is the primary cause of this. We can use Puerto Rico as an example. I'm not sure if you know the story of Puerto Rico. When the minimum wage laws were enacted, it was for all of the continental United States plus their territories. Puerto Rico put it in, and soon their economy just bottomed out because what was being forced for them to pay in Puerto Rico was too high for the cost that they could produce at. They were a lower wage economy, but they were being forced to the wage economy of the United States at the time. So the next year, Congress put an exemption into the federal wage, minimum wage, to exclude everyone up to 25 for minimum wage in Puerto Rico, which helped them, but they couldn't rebound from that because it's still those same laws were still prohibiting employers to pay for goods that were really worth the value of what they paid for, right, for the production of it. And that's one of the reasons why Puerto Rico is in a state of what it's in right now. It is still suffering from this disparity of what you can pay versus what they can sell their product for. There's a disconnect there. Once again, government causing problems. And we think that government's going to fix the problems. I'm sorry, it's the definition of insanity, right? And so if they've caused the problem, why do we think they will fix the problem? We need to get people in Congress that have no ties to those past and will repeal these kind of causing problem legislations.
Okay.
Okay.
Last question. In District 1, there is an incumbent in District 1. And that,
Mr. Scalise.
And this seat has been held by his party ever since the Ford presidency.
Is that far back? Okay.
Why are you a viable candidate for the residents of District 1?
I think it's because I believe in liberty and justice for everyone. I think the Republican Party now has been morphed into liberty and justice for government and not for everyone. That's the big difference. Steve Scalise is the majority whip. Therefore, he's incumbent to do what the party says to do. He's not free to vote his conscience. He may have a bill that he doesn't believe is right. He's not free to do that, let alone for being forced to pay into a committee where he had to be at and compromise on votes and etc. He's not free to do that. If you elect me, and yeah, by the way, I want your vote. I don't know if I've asked for that yet, but I do want your vote. But if selected by the citizens, I'm not going to be incumbent to these people. I'm going to firmly believe and enact the policy of liberty and justice for every citizen. That's what I'm going to be following. That makes the real big difference, because from that, then I'm free to say, what does the Constitution say is the proper role of government? And that's what we're going to do. Maybe I will be Mr. No on Capitol Hill by the time I get up there. But when the people like me and the Justin Amash and others of similar bent are up there, that's going to control the Republican Party. Because right now the Republican Party has a very small, I should say, majority. They don't have a whole lot of people on there. And I think this election they're going to lose a lot more. I don't think it's necessarily because of Trump. Hey, I used Trump in the first sentence here. I didn't know if you're going to ask me questions about Trump throughout the whole thing or not. But anyways, I don't think it's necessarily because of the Trump factor that they'll lose. I think that that people who used to vote always Republican, and St. Tammany, by the way, is a heavy Republican area, which is the dominant part of CD1. I think they're getting tired. The people that I talk to and go door to door with are tired of the Republicans not doing what they've said they're going to do. They have a party platform, and it talks about how great America is and how wonderful America is, right? And that's their platform. And they have some policies that are good written policies. They don't follow it. They do not follow it. Now, you and I may not agree on, I'm presuming, Obamacare. But the Republicans ran on, and Trump as well, ran on repealing Obamacare. That was their battle cry. It's what they said over and over again. And reduce spending. Those were the main things that they kept saying over and over and over to their voters. They have done neither at all. All of a sudden, it wasn't repeal Obamacare. It was repeal and replace. It was, well, we just need to tweak it. Okay? They weren't really serious about getting rid of a program, because every program means power to a politician, and that's what they want. Reduce spending. We're now at $21.1 trillion in debt for my great-great-great-grandchildren. Okay? And who owns this debt? There are other foreign countries that own this debt. Not just us owing it to pay it, but they own the debt and want collection. And if anyone has looked at history, World War I and World War II were caused by debt, because the foreign governments owned the money, owned Germany mostly, and it caused their economy to go down. And the German people, what is it? They rebounded, they reflexed back, fought back about this oppression. And that was one of the major reasons why the Nazi power got into power, was because of the government debt. And that's what we need to get out of. And we need to stop forced medical care. We need to stop uncontrolled spending, which would include the military in the uncontrolled spending, and do everything we can to reduce those taxes. Those three things. So.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for answering our questions. And like I said at the beginning, you have the opportunity to have your final words in closing and tell the audience.
Well, I really had no planned statement to make, but I would encourage you to look at my website, www.kearneyforcongress.com. Read my positions, and my positions are better articulated than me vocalizing it. Go there and make your choice. Don't depend on a party. Depend on the candidate. So last word I'll say is, don't be a coward. Vote for Howard.
Okay.
Okay?
Well, thank you so much.
Hey, thanks a lot. I appreciate you letting me be here. I appreciate it. Thank you.